9 years after she disappeared without a single word, a woman walked into a small-town sporting goods store on a rainy Thursday morning wearing mud-stained trail boots and a washed-out olive shirt that looked like it had survived more than one hard season. The men at the counter started laughing before she even reached the rifle display. 40 minutes later, a retired Marine was gripping the edge of a shelf trying to hold himself together. 2 federal agents were parked outside with an emergency deployment order, and every person who had opened their mouth to mock her was standing in a silence so complete you could hear the rain on the roof and nothing else. Because the woman who had walked in looking like she'd just come off a long trail wasn't who any of them had decided she was. According to the very few people who knew what she had done, and there were few, because almost nothing about her service existed in any file that anyone without the highest clearance could access. She had spent the better part of a decade operating in places that didn't appear on briefing maps, doing work that no official record would ever fully describe, and coming home each time to a silence she had chosen and maintained with the same precision she brought to everything else. Tell us in the comments what city you're watching from today, and stay with us, because the ending of this story is the part none of them expected, and we've been building toward it since the moment she pushed open that door. The bell above the door was still settling when the first comment came. Ryan, mid-20s, the kind of person who had never been seriously wrong about anything in a way that cost him something, was leaning against the glass case with his elbow like he owned the air in the room. He looked at the woman who had just walked in, her trail boots leaving faint damp prints on the floor, her olive shirt untucked, her dark hair pulled back with the kind of simplicity that comes from not having thought about it, and said, loudly enough for the room to function as his audience, "Hunting season's over, sweetheart. You might want to check the calendar." His friend Marcus, taller, baseball cap pulled low, thought that was worth a laugh. He gave it one. The woman, her name was Claire Aston, though that name would mean nothing to anyone in that room for the next 37 minutes, didn't look at either of them. She moved along the wall of rifles with her eyes the way someone reads a page they've already memorized, slow and deliberate, and already knowing what they're looking for. Her gaze moved past the hunting rifles, past the sporting carbines, past everything that was designed to be understood by someone browsing. It stopped at a MK-14 enhanced battle rifle mounted near the end of the display. A serious weapon, military heritage, full-size, the kind of rifle that didn't belong next to the hunting gear surrounding it, and seemed to know it. She pointed at it without turning around. "Can I take that one down?" The store owner, a stocky man in his late 50s named Holloway, with close-cropped gray hair and the unhurried manner of someone who had seen most things across 22 years behind the same counter, looked at her from his position at the register. He gave her the careful look of a man trying to be fair about something his instincts were already nudging him about. "That's a military pattern rifle," he said. "It's not really a starter piece." "I'm not starting," Claire said, still not turning around, still looking at the rifle. Holloway came around the counter, lifted the rifle from the mount, and set it on the glass with the mild ceremony of handing something expensive to someone he wasn't entirely sure knew what they were holding. Claire picked it up with both hands, checked the chamber, verified the safety, and then, right there on the glass counter with the rain still audible on the roof and Ryan still leaning nearby with his elbow still raised like he was about to add something to his first comment, she began a field strip. The pieces came apart the way things come apart when the hands doing it have done it thousands of times in conditions where the speed at which you could reassemble it was the difference between outcomes you didn't want to think about. Not fast, not slow. Exactly the speed that suggests the speed is irrelevant because the hands have long since stopped needing the mind to supervise them. 11 seconds from first motion to last component laid on the glass. Each piece placed in a precise sequence. Nothing rushed, nothing performed for anyone watching. She tapped the barrel in once with one finger. "Your rear sight is drifted about 3/4 of a minute right." Whoever adjusted it last was compensating for a personal hold, not correcting the zero. Anyone shooting this to standard is going to run right of point of aim past 200 yards. She said it the same way someone mentions that a door is unlocked. The store went quiet. Not immediately. Quiet takes a second to travel through a room full of people who were certain about something a moment ago. But it arrived. Ryan's elbow came off the case. Marcus's cap came up slightly, the involuntary lift that happens when a person needs to see something better. A man in a brown canvas vest near the ammunition wall who had been paying a very specific kind of non-attention to the whole scene. The kind that is actually close attention wearing a disguise, pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose and leaned slightly toward the man beside him. He said something too quiet to carry. The man beside him nodded. Once, slowly, in the particular way that means, yes, I see it too. But the room wasn't done yet. Not even close. And what was coming, what none of them could have predicted, was already 40 minutes away. Hadn't started yet. Marcus tried to recover the ground he'd lost. Okay, he said, pushing the word out louder than the room needed. So you know how to take one apart. Anyone can learn that on a weekend. Can you actually shoot it? He said it with an audience in mind, the way people do when they want witnesses to a certainty they've already committed to. Claire looked at him for exactly 1 second. Not with anger, not with contempt. With the specific quality of attention that belongs to someone who is very briefly considering whether a thing is worth their time and has already arrived at an answer. Then she looked at Holloway. Indoor range. Out back, Holloway said. His voice had adjusted slightly. Not dramatically, just enough. I'd like to use it. The range smelled the way they all do, burnt powder, cold recycled air, the specific quiet of an enclosed space where loud things regularly happen. Claire asked for a target set at 80 yards. Holloway raised an eyebrow. The standard setup was 50. She didn't explain. He moved the target without comment and stood back. She loaded 7 rounds, settled her stance, and went still in the way that people go still when stillness is something that has been trained into them over years and not an accident of mood. The kind of still that doesn't look like effort because it stopped being effort a long time ago. What happened in the next 45 seconds was described differently by every person present, depending on who they were and what they brought to the watching. Ryan said later, to Marcus, that it didn't look real. Marcus said nothing at all. The man in the brown vest, whose name was Caruso, who had done 2 tours in places he didn't talk about, and then a third, and then come home, and opened a hardware store 4 blocks away, and who came into Holloway's on rainy mornings sometimes just because he wanted to be near weapons he no longer carried, said it looked like something he had seen once, long ago, at a qualification facility he had signed documents agreeing not to discuss. He said it very quietly, to himself, with his glasses still pushed up on his nose. Holloway, who had been running that range for 22 years, did not say anything for a long time. 7 shots. 1 hole. Not 7 holes grouped near each other. 1 hole. A single ragged opening, at 80 yards, from a standing position, using a rifle she had never held until 12 minutes earlier. The kind of result that doesn't come from practice. It comes from a relationship with a firearm built over years in conditions that most people will never find themselves in, and that fewer survive long enough to describe in any detail. Claire lowered the rifle, checked the chamber once more, out of habit, not thought, the way you lock a door you've already locked, and set it on the shelf beside the lane. She walked back toward the main floor without looking at the target or at anyone who was looking at it. Subscribe to Legendary Veterans right now, because what happens in the next 8 minutes is the part this whole story has been pointing toward, and none of the people in that shop were ready for it. Not Holloway. Not Caruso. Not the woman in the navy blazer who was about to make a very significant mistake. Back on the main floor, a woman in a pressed navy blazer who had been watching from the moment Claire walked and stepped directly into her path. Mid-40s, the kind of polish that communicates effort and intention. She looked at Claire's boots, then her shirt, then her face, in a deliberate sequence designed to communicate a specific assessment. That was quite a show, she said. The word show landed exactly where she meant it to. But performance on a controlled range doesn't tell me very much. Who exactly are you trying to impress here? Claire set 2 boxes of .308 ammunition on the counter beside her without slowing down. I came to buy ammunition, she said. You don't belong here, the woman said, her voice pulling tight at the edges. You walk in looking like that, you make a scene, and you expect everyone to simply rearrange what they think. Claire placed a cleaning kit on the counter next to the ammunition. She turned to the woman slowly, with the particular unhurry of someone who has decided exactly how much of themselves the moment deserves. I spent 9 years making sure that people like you could walk into rooms like this one without anyone trying to make that impossible, she said. Quietly, evenly, the way someone states a fact they've had no reason to doubt. You don't need to understand what that means. You just need to know it happened. The woman's mouth opened fractionally. Then it closed. A man 2 shelves away who had been nodding along with the woman's posture a moment ago suddenly found something on the shelf beside him that required his complete and immediate attention. The store's security officer, a man named Pratt, newer badge, pressed uniform, the particular bearing of someone who has not yet been tested in a way that left a permanent mark, pushed through the small cluster that had gathered near the counter and pointed at Claire's boots, her shirt, her worn canvas bag. "I need to see identification," he said, with the projection of someone who wants an audience to feel protected, "and documentation of authorization to handle a restricted pattern firearm." Claire reached into her bag. The room went still in the specific way it goes still when something is about to stop being a situation and become something else entirely. The kind of still where people stop pretending to be doing other things. She placed a laminated card on the counter. Holloway leaned forward from behind the register. Whatever expression he had been wearing was no longer that expression. The reorganization happening in his face was the slow kind. The kind that involves not just an idea changing, but an entire structure of accumulated assumptions being taken apart at the load-bearing points and replaced, piece by piece, with something he was only beginning to understand. Pratt looked at the card. The muscles in his jaw moved differently than they had a moment ago. "This isn't Dash," he started. "It is," Claire said, and put the card back. In the far corner, near the gun safe display, a man who had not spoken a single word since Claire walked through the door slowly stood up from the low stool that Holloway kept near the window for customers who needed to rest. He was in his late 60s. His right hand had a slight tremor that became more visible when he was still than when he was moving, the particular irony of a certain kind of damage. He had a pin on his collar from a veterans organization, the kind you wear not to be recognized, but because putting it on in the morning is part of how you start the day. His voice, when it came, had the roughness of something that had been kept in a space not designed to hold it for a long time. "Were you on the river operation?" he said. 11 years ago. Northern Sector. January." He stopped, swallowed. His hand was shaking more visibly now, and he was not trying to hide it. "There was a woman. She got 5 of us out. 22 hours. No air support, no radio, most of it on foot in the dark." He stopped again. "She never told any of us her name." He looked at Claire directly, with the specific look of a man who has been carrying a question for 11 years and has just, in a sporting goods store on a rainy Thursday, found himself standing in front of what might be the answer. Claire looked at him for a long moment. "You made it home," she said. 2 words. Nothing more. The old man sat back down on the stool. He pressed the back of his fist against his mouth and looked at the floor with the expression of someone who has been carrying a weight for a very long time and has just, without warning, been given permission to set it down. His shoulders moved once, almost imperceptibly. The bell above the door rang. 2 people entered. Dark jackets, no visible insignia. Their posture came from years of a specific kind of training. They didn't look around the way civilians look around, left to right, catching whatever's there. They found Claire in the first half-second and walked directly to her, through the room, past everyone, without making eye contact with anyone else. The one on the left extended a sealed envelope. The one on the right stood at a particular kind of attention that had nothing performative about it. "Priority deployment," said the one on the left. "Authorization level 3. Window opens in 18 minutes. No one in the shop was pretending to be doing anything else. Claire took the envelope, read the single page inside in approximately 4 seconds, creased it back along its folds, and returned it to the interior of her jacket. She turned back to Holloway. "Both boxes of .308, the cleaning kit, and the bronze bore brush on the second peg," she said. "That's everything." Holloway got it. His hands moved with more care than usual. Ryan was standing near the far wall with his cap in both hands, rotating it slowly. He was looking at the floor. Then he looked up. Something had shifted in his face. Not guilt yet, exactly, but the material that guilt is made from. The groundwork. He looked at Claire as she picked up the paper bag Holloway had packed. "How did you dash?" he started. Claire paused. 1 step. She didn't turn all the way around. "Just enough." "You don't need to know the specifics," she said. "You need to remember how you spoke to someone before you knew anything about them. That's the part that stays." She paid at the counter. Exact bills. No card. As she passed the old man on the stool, he reached out and put his hand on her forearm. One hand, trembling, firm, certain, the grip of someone who has waited 11 years to say something with no words available and has found the only gesture that fits. She stopped. She looked at his hand. She looked at his face. She nodded once. Then she walked out. Outside, the vehicle was already running. Claire got in. The 2 agents followed. The vehicle moved through the wet parking lot without lights or hurry, turned onto the road, and within 2 minutes was part of the gray morning and then was not visible at all. What happened inside the store afterward happened slowly. Caruso posted 4 sentences that evening in a closed veteran group. No name, Just a description: a rifle, 11 seconds, 7 shots through one hole at 80 yards, 2 men with an envelope, an old man's hand on a forearm. By midnight, the thread had 300 responses. By the next afternoon, someone had cross-referenced a Winter River extraction. Northern sector, 22 hours, 5 survivors. No radio, female operative unidentified. With a partially released operational summary that used 4 clinical sentences and named no one. The match wasn't confirmed officially. It didn't need to be. Pratt reviewed the footage that evening, watched it twice, filed his report, set his pen down, and sat with the ceiling for a while. He transferred to a different position 3 weeks later and enrolled in a law enforcement program. People who knew him said he'd gotten quieter, more careful about the distance between what he assumed and what he actually knew. Holloway kept the range target in the flat drawer beneath the register. On days when the shop got loud with noise that didn't mean anything, he'd open the drawer, look at it once, and close it. 7 rounds. 1 hole. 80 yards. For minutes with the rifle. Ryan found the thread 3 days later. Read it twice. Put his phone down and sat with whatever that produced. He'd opened the whole thing by saying she didn't belong. By the time he finished reading, the only thing he was certain hadn't belonged was his certainty about who she was before he knew anything about her. Claire didn't look back as the vehicle moved through town. She sat with the paper bag on her lap and watched the rain track sideways across the window and the road become highway and the highway open into country that had no name she was authorized to know. She had a deployment window of 18 minutes and a briefing she would read once and not need again. She had not walked into that store to prove anything. She had come to buy ammunition and a cleaning kit for a job that started in 48 hours, in conditions that would require her to be exactly who she had always been. Unannounced. Precise. Completely undisturbed by whether the room understood what it had just been standing next to. She had been made slowly, under sustained pressure, without an audience. The world doesn't always know what that looks like when it walks through a door in trail boots and an olive shirt. Sometimes it laughs. Sometimes it demands credentials. Sometimes it tells the thing it doesn't understand to go back where it came from. She had never needed the world to recognize her. She needed the people she was sent to protect to make it home. That was the measure, the only one that had ever mattered. An old man with a shaking hand had waited 11 years for a nod from the right person. 2 words and a single gesture. It had been enough. The vehicle moved through the gray morning, and the town disappeared behind it, and the road opened ahead, and she was already somewhere else in the way people are somewhere else when the place they're going demands everything they have. Subscribe to Legendary Veterans, because some people walk through every room without ever needing the room to know their name.